The movie starts, and we see people jumping into the water from a cliff with their belongings. Then we see a mother, Adele, and her daughter, Sarah, in the car, driving next to it. They talk about the road, and Sarah says that they are lost. Adele denies it and says that they are not. They continue arguing, and Adele tries to call someone, but they can't get a signal there. Sarah says they should have stayed at a hotel in Cardiff, and Adele asks if she doesn't want to surprise her dad. Sarah doesn't answer, and we see them inside the car in the night. We see Sarah sleeping, and Adele covers her with a blanket and gets ready to sleep while it's raining heavily. Adele wakes up in the morning and sees Sarah outside, near the rock monument. Adele gets out of the car and starts calling Sarah's name. Sarah walks around the monument and gets behind it. Adele reaches it and looks for Sarah, but she can't find her. She starts looking around, and goes to the edge of the cliff to see if she fell down. Then a ghost appears behind Adele and pushes her down the cliff. Adele wakes up, and sees Sarah sleeping next to her. She turns her head and sees sheep. She starts screaming, and Sarah wakes up, tells her to stop, it's just sheep. Adele gets out, and sees the car stuck in the mud. Sarah gets out too, and Adele offers her to walk to her dad's house. Sarah asks if she's going to tell him about what happened. Adele asks if she wants her to say it, and Sarah says no. Then we see them walking, and they see a house in the distance. Sarah runs to her dad, James, and they hug each other. Adele comes, and they start talking while walking towards the house. Adele says that their car got stuck in the mud, and James asks the man who's working on the side of the house, David, if he can help them to get the car out. David says sure, and he introduces himself to the others. They get inside and James tells them where are their rooms. Sarah runs upstairs to check her room. James asks Adele if everything's okay with Sarah, and he says she seems different. Adele says it's fine, and she just missed him. Then we see Sarah in her room, looking out from her telescope. She sees the monument and hears a sound. She gets out to the hallway to follow it, and finds a stairway that goes upstairs. She goes up and finds a door in the attic, and she gets in. She sees the window slamming open again and again, making the sound. We see James showing Adele her room. Sarah starts looking around, and we see the ghost behind her. She touches the boxes, and drops one that is filled with old keys. Adele calls her name, and they come to the room. James helps her, picking up the keys, while Adele looks around. Sarah asks James where the keys belong. James says that they find them all over the place, and they don't seem to fit any of the locks in the house. Adele asks what this room is, and James says he has no idea what they used it as before, but now they are using it as a storage room. They get out of the room, and we see Sarah playing outside with their dog, Elvis. They go near the monument and Sarah looks at the writings on it. She tries to read them, and David tells her it's about Annan, the place where we go when we die. James comes and tells Sarah to find Elvis. It's time to go back. Adele says she'll go with her, but James stops her, saying she can do it. Adele then turns and asks David why the monument is here. David tells them that there were people living there 50 years ago. They believed the religion that they created from the old Welsh legends. He says that the religion was close to the other ones, and Adele asks then why they made the monument. David says that one day, they all jumped from the edge of the cliff. Adele says what a way to go, and James says they were probably thinking that they were going to heaven. Then we see Sarah looking down from the cliff to see if Elvis is there. Then the sheep around her start acting strange, and they run towards her. Sarah looks at the cliff behind her, and she looks at the sheep again. She decides to lay down, and she screams. They hear her scream and start running towards her. She gets up and sees the sheep jumping from the cliff. They come and start checking her to see if she's okay. Sarah pushes them away and says she's fine. Then she starts walking towards the house. Then we see her writing in her journal while laying in her bed. James comes in and touches her shoulder. He apologizes for scaring her and asks if she's all right, if there's something she wants to talk about. Sarah says no, and James tells her to be nice to her mom. He says he missed her, and Sarah says she missed him too. They hug and kiss while Adele watches them from the door. She leaves to go to her room, and James sees her in the hallway. They say goodnight to each other and go away. Adele comes to Sarah's room and lays down next to her. We see them fighting, and Adele slapping Sarah. Sarah yells at her, saying that she hates her, and runs out of the room. Then we see David looking down at the sheep that jumped from the cliff. Then we see Sarah and James outside together. Adele watches them as they play a game, where Sarah hits 2 stones together to use Morse alphabet, and asks him to guess the word she said. Adele comes out right when Sarah was asking James if they can go exploring. Adele asks Sarah if she wants to go for a walk. Sarah turns her back to her, and starts walking without answering. James says he'll show them a shortcut to the beach. Adele gives Sarah a red cardigan, saying it's too cold, and they start walking. They see David with the sheep when they get down, and he tells them that they are the sheep that fall from the cliff yesterday. Sarah says they didn't fall, they jumped, and David stops to look at her. Adele asks Sarah what she means, and Sarah simply repeats that they jumped. David says he saw the sheep doing weird things before, but he never saw something like this. James says he'll help him, and tells the others to go on, he'll catch up with them later. Sarah and Adele start walking, and Adele keeps trying to talk to Sarah, but she doesn't answer her. Sarah goes to climb some rocks that are not too high, and Adele tells her to be careful. Adele finds glasses in the water, and takes them out. We see that they are the same glasses that dropped into the water at the beginning of the movie. Sarah notices something in the water, and reaches down to get it. She takes out a necklace with an old key that looks like the ones in the house. Then she notices something else in the water, and we see the ghost of a little girl calling her name. Adele finds a piece of human jaw on the shore, and she looks up at the monument. She starts calling Sarah while walking towards the place she went. She panics as she doesn't see or hear her and starts looking at the water. She sees Sarah's shoe floating there. Adele yells at James for help and jumps into the water. She starts looking for her while they run towards her. The waves get stronger, and Adele yells for help. James pulls her out with David, and he asks about Sarah. Adele says that she fell into the water, and James jumps in to look for her while David tries to keep Adele on the rocks. Then we see a police officer talking to James, saying that they'll continue searching for her in the morning, but they need to prepare themselves. James says he can't stay here. He's going down to join the search. He hugs Adele and promises that they'll find her. Adele goes to Sarah's room and starts looking at her belongings. She sees Sarah screaming and asking her to help. Adele wakes up and looks out of the window. She sees a girl that looks like Sarah, and she runs out after her. The girl starts running and gets inside of the old slaughterhouse that James said they were planning to turn into his studio. Adele follows her and gets inside. She starts walking around and finds the little girl. She calls her Sarah, and the girl says she can't find her here. She says this is where the shepherd finished the sheep after he took out the dark inside them. Adele tries to get closer to her, saying it's okay, she's not going to hurt her, and she gets her flashlight back. She points it to where the girl was standing, but she disappears. James comes home and sees Adele drawing the girl she saw. Adele tells him everything, and James asks if it was Sarah. Adele says no, and James notices that her hand is bleeding. She starts crying while he cleans it. Adele says they fought before they came here, and she says that she's a terrible mother. James tells her that Sarah loves her, and she's not a bad mom. Then we see James leaving with his car, and Adele goes to the kitchen. She hears a sound from the attic and goes upstairs. She opens the door and sees the window hitting its frame again. She closes it and runs into David while she was going back to the kitchen. He tells her that he was there to pick up James. Then we see him going next to James. James says he never should have let them go off alone. David tells him to go home and stay with Adele, but James says that he wasn't there when Sarah was lost and he wants to be there when they find her. They get into the boats and start looking for her. Adele goes to the slaughterhouse and starts looking around. She finds the word Annan carved into some of the wood. She continues to look around and finds a book with the drawings of humans with notes. Then we see her in the house, explaining it to James. They start arguing and Adele leaves. She goes to a library to do some more research. She shows the writing in Welsh to the old lady who's working there, and the lady explains it to her. Then she tells Adele about the legend. Adele then finds news about a mad shepherd committing a mass. Then she finds another news article where she sees the girl from the slaughterhouse with the shepherd, saying that she's his daughter, Ebril. She sees the box with the old keys in Ebril's hands. She goes home and tries to open it, but she can't. She gets frustrated and throws it against the wall. Then the room of the door slams shut, and she tries to open it. Someone hits the door from the other side, and Adele asks who's there. She yells for them to open the door, and a girl says she can't. Adele asks if that's Sarah, and she says yes. She tells her that she's counting to 3, and she needs to open the door. She starts counting, and the door opens. She gets out, looking for Sarah, but she finds a doll on the ground instead. She goes to Sarah's room and sees someone laying on her bed. Then we see her running to James and telling him that Ebril, the shepherd's daughter, is upstairs. She knows where Sarah is, but James says Sarah drowned. Adele says she's not, but James says it's done. They called off the search. He turns around and sees Ebril in the door of the house. They get inside, and Adele starts asking her questions. Ebril goes upstairs, and they follow her. She comes in front of the stairs that go to the room in the attic. She says that there's a room in there. That's where the shepherd kept his lamb, while we see her trying to get away from him in that room. Ebril says he was trying to take her to where the sheep were, while Ebril holds her head and starts crying. Adele keeps asking her questions, and yells at her for not answering. Ebril runs towards James, and he hugs her, while telling Adele to stop it. He says that he'll talk to her, and takes her to Sarah's room. They talk, and James gives her a dress to change her clothes. He tells her to come and talk to him once she's done. He tells her to not worry, and that it's going to be all right. Then he leaves. We see Adele trying to open the box, and she notices something red in the hole she made on the wall. She tries to break the wall while we see Ebril in the bathtub, slowly laying down. James comes to the room, and Adele shows him the red cardigan that Sarah was wearing. Ebril comes and tells them she knows where she is. She's in a much better place now. Adele starts asking her more questions and grabs her arm. She falls to the ground, and James sees blood coming out of her head. He takes her to the hospital, and the doctor says that it's not the first time that her skull had been open. Her head been open more than once with trepanning before. They talk, and the doctor leaves. We see Ebril hitting the bed frame with her fingers. Then we see Adele hearing in sauce from the attic room. She goes to check, but doesn't see anything. Then she hears Sarah's voice from the hole she created while looking for the cardigan, and she sticks her hand inside. She finds the necklace with the key and runs downstairs to try it on the box, but it doesn't work. Then she sees the doll that she found on the ground and goes to David with it. They talk about the legend, and David says she should leave it. Adele starts yelling at him, saying that she would do anything to bring her back, and he says that's what he was afraid of. He starts telling her the real story of the shepherd. He says that he believed in the old legends, and used the people, sacrificing them so he could get his child back. He tells her how he made everyone jump from the cliff. Then we see Eberl waking up, and James comes up to talk to her. Eberl asks him if he can be her dad, and James says he can't, he already has a daughter. Eberl asks what if she never comes back, and she looks away. Daffod takes out something to show it to Adele. She sees his name in there and says he was there. Daffod says yes. He was there and was too scared to jump, but his father and mother did. The shepherd took him, and he helped him with the sheep until Eberl came back. Adele asks if it really worked, and Daffod says it did, but she brought back something inside her, the darkness. It was then the sheep began to get ill. He tells her that the shepherd locked her inside of the room in the attic. Daffod then says that he couldn't stand to watch her anymore, so he unlocked the door, and we see Eberl pushing the shepherd down the cliff. Then we see Daffod throwing her back into the water inside a sack. He then throws the key with her, while we hear him saying she should have never been brought back, so he sent her back himself. He says he should have gone with her to make sure she never came back, but she found a way, and that way is Sarah. Adele gets up, saying that Sarah's alive. Then we see James in the hospital. He sees the nurses running to Eberl's room, and he goes too. He sees the bed is empty and runs outside. We see Adele calling the hospital to talk to James, but they explain the situation to her and she tells it to Daffod. They go to the slaughterhouse, and he tells her to stay outside. He gets in and starts looking around. Adele hears a sound coming from the basement and she gets in too. She starts looking around and finds the chair that the shepherd used to Eberl. We hear Eberl whisper something and scream. The sheep start to stampede, and Daffod falls to the ground, getting crushed under the sheep. Adele hears the sounds and goes to there. She starts looking for Daffod and finds his body. Then she hears Eberl crying. Eberl says she never meant to hurt anyone. Then we see James back in the house, looking for Adele. Then he sees her, carrying Eberl to the cliff, and runs out. Eberl says everyone is hurt because of her. Adele puts Eberl down and says that she can fix it now. Eberl goes to the edge of the cliff, but James comes and tells her to get away. Adele tries to stop him, but James says that he'll be her father. Eberl tries to run back after hearing this, but Adele catches her and tells James that she's bringing Sarah back. James tries to stop her and runs behind them, but Adele jumps from the cliff. Then we see Adele waking up in Anna. She starts walking and sees Eberl. They talk, and she follows her. They get to the house, and Adele hears Sarah from the room in the attic. She runs there and sees the shepherd. He tells her to see what she had done to Sarah, and Adele goes into the hole in the wall. She continues to follow Sarah's voice and gets to the slaughterhouse. She sees her with her eyes white, and Sarah tells her to go and see what she had awakened. Adele gets tied to the torture chair. She sees the shepherd coming up the stairs, and Adele tries to talk to Sarah. Sarah gets mad and slaps her. Then we see what happened after she slapped Sarah before. She runs to the bathroom, and Adele goes behind her, telling her that she'll count to 3 and she'll open the door to her. Adele starts counting and the door opens. She sees Sarah and asks if she took pills. Sarah says yes, and Adele tries to make her throw up. Sarah loses consciousness. She calls the ambulance and performs CPR on her, and Sarah comes back to life while we see her opening her eyes under the water. She sees Sarah turning into Eberl. Adele says that she wants a second chance, but Eberl says ghosts don't get a second chance. Adele says she's still alive, and she finds herself in the stairs of the house. She runs to the room in the house and yells for Sarah. She apologizes to her and gets the keys out of her pocket to open the door. They hug, and we see Adele getting out of the water. She gets to the shore and finds footprints. She follows them and sees Sarah running to James. They hug and get inside of the house. James closes the door right when Adele was about to get in. She tries to open it and tries to yell at them, but she can't. She watches them as they talk, and Sarah asks where her mom is. James tells her that she did a very brave thing to bring her back, and she loves her so much. Sarah starts crying, while Adele screams at them to look at her, saying she's there, but they don't hear her. James says it's the two of them now, and Sarah says she wants to go home. We see James waiting for Sarah next to his car, while Sarah goes to the edge of the cliff and throws the box into the water. We see Adele back in the Anna. She hears them as they are talking, and hears a sound from upstairs. She goes there and opens the door of Sarah's room. She sees the room as it was, and sees Eberl laying in the bed, crying. Adele lays next to Eberl and hugs her. The movie ends there.